All right, so the pieces that we went over before the video began were the two definitions, right? Billy, what was that first one?
Monroe Doctrine.
Monroe Doctrine, nice. And then Anna, I said it aloud for you. You remember what that second one was?
Sectionalism.
Sectionalism, very good. So we went over those two and we wrote those on our flashcards. All right, we're going to use those for a later date. The other big things you're about to see are the objectives for the day, and then we have one other objective that's going to carry us into tomorrow, and we'll write that later. So we're going to understand what the era of good feeling. What is that word, those two words actually, good feeling?
Time of good.
A time of good, right? So what do you think of in our history? What's a good time in our history?
When we became free from Britain.
Oh, look at you. All right, anybody else? How about a good time in your life? We just got back from Thanksgiving break. Was that a good time?
No.
All right. Some of us filled our stomachs, right? All right, so that's the era of good time for us personally. Now, again, we're talking about the United States history here. So when we freed ourselves from British rule, that was a perfect example. All right, then we're going to understand these three people, the influence of John Marshall, Andrew Jackson, and then this Monroe Doctrine, all right, written up by other presidents.
I know Andrew Jackson.
You recognize that name?
He wasn't a president, but he's
No?
Oh, he
We
was?
better do a little history lesson. Let's see if we can get rid of this. For some reason, the touchscreen's not being my friend right now. See if we can zoom down a little bit. There we go. So, how about I read the first paragraph and then Anna, would you like to help me with the second one?
Sure.
Okay, so nationalism in the Monroe administration. Following the War of 1812, something you guys have been talking about recently. Some of you have been added to history class more recently. So you're kind of play catch up. America's attention turned inward. Years of involvement in international affairs were followed by years of nationalism. Sounds a little bit like this word. All right? President James Monroe, who succeeded James Madison in the White House, frequently referred to his speeches to the new national feeling that swept the country in his inaugural address. Monroe stated that increased harmony of opinion had developed. In his first annual message to Congress, he rejoiced that local jealousies are rapidly yielding to more generous, enlarged, and enlightening views of national policy. That's a lot of big words. What do we get from that? Any idea?
But honestly, to me, it just means that over time things got better.
Okay, over time things got better. That's a good way of saying it. All right? So we were developing from these small, here's how I like to look at it. Where did we land when we came to the United States? Anybody know? We landed in two big states. We landed kind of all over the East Coast, but two states that are memorable.
Rhode Island,
Close. Another state that's up there.
Maine,
We spread into Rhode Island. Jace, you remember it?
New York.
Close. It's a little too inward. Starts with the same two letters as Maine.
Montana.
What's that thing that a sail hangs on a boat?
Red Sox.
There you go. There's another hint.
Patriots.
Starts with the MA.
Starts with an M-A.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. That's one. And where else? A little bit south of here.
Oh.
A couple hours south of here. Maybe you traveled there during the
Virginia?
Thanksgiving. Virginia. Very good. Those are two big settlement areas. So we came there. We settled out. And then over time, as we entered into the 19th century, people started realizing, let's spread out a little bit. And then we started developing this thing called nationalism, where we said, all right, this United States thing is kind of a good idea. All right, rather than just focus on my little town, I'm going to focus on the entire nation. All right? So that's what happened there. It's not scanning for me. Let's see if the pen will work. Nope. All right, Anna, we're reading that second paragraph, and I'll zoom down with the keyboard.
Among the factors that promoted the growth of nationalism were the far-reaching decisions of the Supreme Court under Chief Justice John Marshall. Surprisingly, many Republicans praised Marshall's decision. Furthermore, as the fear of the central government
Furthermore, as the fear of the central government waned,
the Republican Party adopted a number of federalist principles.
Very good. Now, before you continue, I'm going to highlight this, and then you're going to read it for us. See if this pen will allow me to do it. It's not going to be my friend right now. I want to highlight all of this.
I don't think you're
I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. Right about there. Now, go ahead. Read it for me.
Republicans in Congress passed a protective share, established a second, I can't read
The Second National Bank, the blue might be
it. I
hurting you.
can't see it.
All right. And reached, I'll finish because it's highlighted in blue. and reached a diplomatic understanding with Britain. Alright, so we did three things. Passed protective tariffs, those are like, what's another T word? So it's the same. Tariff also could mean,
Place
no, starts with a T.
where your parents have to pay.
Every April, we have to pay our
Debt.
taxes. Very good. Tariff is much like a tax. We established a second national bank, so we're growing as a nation. So we established that we can redistribute the wealth, we can have more money. And diplomatic understanding with Britain. It doesn't mean that we're going to be best buddies just yet, but at least we say, hey, I'm going to stay out of your business, you stay out of mine. That's it. All right? Indeed, the Republicans acted so much like Federalists that the two parties buried their differences during what is termed as this idea, the era of good feeling. So we're growing as a nation. All right? Jace, can you hit the down key for me a little bit, so we can get down a little bit further. Bill, you want to wake up and read for me? Just beneath, right here.
Just need this place surface, however, range strong currents of
Sectionalism, it's a tough one, I know. A lot of sounds there.
the special economic interests of the Northeast, the West, and the South led to political differences on the major issue of the day. The bank, the tariff, international improvements, and slavery. During the 1820s, these political differences
Brought.
brought
Mm-hmm.
the formation, once again, of two distinct political parties. The
Nationalistic
nationalistic
spirit.
of 1815 gave way to sectional
Rivalry. Good. Scan down a little bit for me, Jace. So all we're saying there is that different areas along this East Coast area are going to have different interests. And as we spread westward, right, we settled all along this side of the United States, what we call the East Coast. Massachusetts area and Virginia. All right, as we spread westward, we're going to have other increasing interests. You can keep going down. You see the objectives that I have on the board. The only one that we're not going to talk about today that we're going to get into tomorrow is the causes of westward movement. Now, I do not want you to write every word that shows up there for Monroe Doctrine, nor do I want you to write every word that shows up for sectionalism. Let's talk real quick and find an easy way that we can write out these definitions for the other side of your card. The Monroe Doctrine says it was a doctrine that European nations should not interfere with American nations or try to acquire more territory in the Western Hemisphere. I can read the other half as well. I don't think it's as valuable. The Monroe Doctrine was derived from President Monroe's message in Congress on December 2nd, 1823, and became part of the United States foreign policy. What is the most important, or what are some of the most important words in there? The first sentence is really important. What in that first sentence?
The doctrine, whatever it is.
Doctrine.
Doctrine that European nations should not interfere with American nations.
That's all I'm going to highlight right now. Let's see if I can get it. Right there. European nations should not interfere with American nations. That is the most important few words. And it means something to you. Because as we learn more about Monroe Doctrine, you're going to see exactly what that means. But if you know that Europe and America are going to stay apart from one another, then you understand the entirety of the Monroe Doctrine. Alright? See if you can write that down on the back of your, on the lined part of your card, nice and neat. You're going to use these later, I promise you that. Right around there. If you wrote it on the side with the word, don't worry about it. Alright, you're going to reference them later. These are a good study trick. Alright? You can look at the vocab word or the definition, and then you can flip it over and see if you got the answer right by guessing what's on the other side of the card. You write that? European nations should not interfere with America. You could just write, let's see if I can create an easier way to write it. I think I can erase these vocab words right now, right?
Yeah.
Dylan, I'd be happy if you wrote like this. The symbol generally means does not equal, but in this case we're saying severing the ties, like crossing out. So write Europe, equal sign with a line through it, America. And that'll be your symbol for Europe and America are not going to meddle in each other's business.
Right on the top one. This one's last.
Now while you're writing that, I'm going to look at the next word. And it's sectionalism. We talked about that one that was up on the board at the very beginning. Sectionalism is support for one section without regard for the needs of the other section or the nation as a whole. What's a good analogy for that? Or what's another way you can look at that? You don't have to look at that like all North Carolinians are going to support North Carolina and only North Carolina. What's another way you could do that?
Focus on yourself.
Focus on yourself, right? That's people that are only focused on themselves. All right? I like to use the analogy of people who really like to shop at a certain grocery store. All right? They say, nah, I don't go to Kroger or Wegmans or Kroger. That's the South. I only shop at Food Lion. Or Mr. K who walks around with his head held high saying, I don't root for any other team but the Seahawks. All right? That would be sectionalism. Now the irony of the situation is Mr. K is not from Seattle or Washington, so he supports another area. But if you were from Philadelphia and you're a huge Phillies fan, that would be sectionalism. All right? So support for one section. We're trying to get a support for one section. You can write the rest as well because it is important, but I think the most important thing is sectionalism is support for one section without regard to the needs of the other. So I'm a Phillies fan, I walk into the room, there's a bunch of Yankees fans in the room, I say, screw you guys. You guys don't need my support, you don't need my friendship. I'm a Phillies fan. Don't come anywhere near me. It could be anything. I'm just trying to give you an example that you can relate to. Alright? If you are an iPhone user, I bet you've had this issue with Android users. Nah, man, Android sucks. Da-da-da-da-da. You know, iPhone, Apple products are the way to go. Alright? Vice versa. Alright, so support for one section. Jace, hit the down button for me. You can leave the vocab words up there. I just want to get to the questions so we can go start getting over them for those who are a little bit ahead. You got it, Mr. K. Thank you.
I'm still writing.
It's alright, take your time. I'm not rushing you. But, yeah, there you go. So for those who are ahead, they can help me out with the questions because it's just a quick review. Good reminder. It says the blank doctrine. It almost gives you the answer. The blank doctrine stated that European nations should not interfere with or acquire more territory from Western Hemisphere. The what doctrine? Billy. Monroe Doctrine. Nice. Alright. He's got it. He's got it. Keep making you move over there. Everybody got the vocab right before I went too far ahead?
Yeah.
Alright, the last one, support for one section without regard to the other sections or a nation as a whole is called? This is easy. These are toss-ups. When you only have two vocabulary words, it's pretty simple. What is it, Billy? I know you know it.
I don't know how to say it.
Sexualism, right. Sectionalism. Ugh. We're going to get there in a minute. He looks like a president, right? Because it's old. He's got that weird haircut, right? All right, go ahead.
Can you help write? Got that one?
Did you get sectionalism?
No, I'm not gonna do
Oh, you can help him with it. You didn't get sectionalism? All right, I got you. We're not going to get ahead. I don't want you guys to fall behind. This was the most important thing for sectionalism. Support for one section. I'll leave it up there. I thought you got it. Saw you right there. Anna, since you're a little ahead, why don't you read the first paragraph for me, and then we'll catch everybody up when we get done it.
I can't see that. I don't have my glasses.
Oh, okay. Glasses. I didn't know if it was the blue earlier that was confusing me. Make sure you have support for one section. The era of good feelings. James Monroe, Madison's Secretary of State, was elected president in 1816. There you go. There's your answer. Dale, you paying attention? 1816. There's your boy, James Monroe. That's a picture right there. That's the president. All right? During his first term, Monroe adopted enough of the Federalist principles, which is what you guys have been talking about lately, to satisfy former Federalists. In his election of 1820, Monroe received all but one electoral vote. With that, the Federalist Party died, and no new opposition party arose. Monroe toured the country, something no other president had done. And in New England, an article was published entitled "The Era of Good Feelings," a name that has been used by historians to describe this period. Down for me? We're going to skip over his inaugural address, but what do you know about the idea of an inaugural address? What is the word inaugural? Anybody know inaugural? No? That means first. First. All right? So when is generally a president's first speech?
Martin Luther King.
When is a president's first speech? I know we're tired. We just had a 5-day weekend. Liven up. I got candy for you at the end. When is a president's first speech?
What do you mean? Is the person
When's the first time
When's the first time they
a
speak?
president speaks?
Shortly
After they've
after,
been-
right?
after
After you get elected. Let's say, Anna, you were voted president of this classroom. You were voted, and then you come in here and give a big speech saying, listen, all those things I told you I was going to do when you voted for me, I'm going to do. And we're going to start by doing this, and then that, and then this, and then that. All right? That would be your inaugural address. You want to build some hype of all those people who supported you. All right? Go ahead down. We talked about this word. Keep going until it's at the top. Protective tariff. All right, protective tariff will be a tax. During the War of 1812, American manufacturers were forced to produce the materials needed within the United States. All right, if we're going to tell, eventually, if we're going to tell England, listen, we're going to break ties from you, we want our freedom, and then we're going to say, listen, you're not allowed to come over here and interfere in our affairs, we probably have to start doing stuff for ourselves. It's like when you leave the house, whether you're an adult or you've already moved out, you got to start doing your laundry, start washing your dishes, all those kind of things. You can't keep calling mom over to your house every time you got a bowl from cereal sitting in your sink. All right, or every time that one shirt you want to wear on Friday night is dirty, you can't keep calling mom over to do it for you. All right, so that's how we had to break our ties with England completely. So we had to start producing our own stuff. Following the war, England deluged the American market with goods that were priced much lower than those of the budding American manufacturers. This is a big piece. We're going to need that in a minute as well. So, after our war, England says, listen, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it Black Friday all the time over in America. I'm going to sell goods real cheap, because then American goods that they're manufacturing on their own, they're not going to be worth anything. Nobody's going to buy them. They're going to buy our stuff. All right? So imagine if we just had a big fight with somebody, and then they come over, and they go to one of your other friends, and they say, listen, I'll hang out with you all the time, and we'll be best friends going forward. And then you feel like you've lost that other friend. That's kind of what England was doing. They were kind of going behind our back, and they were tricking us, and what they were doing is having the Americans buy all their goods really cheap so that we continue to buy from them, whereas American markets either went into debt or died. Many American manufacturers went into bankruptcy. Of the 150 textile mills, that's where they make clothing, all those kind of things, around Providence, Rhode Island, fewer than a dozen survived. So of 150, only about 12 or so survived. That's not many. All right, go down a little bit. Manufacturers, whoa, asked Congress. Keep going. A little higher, a little higher. A little higher, just at the top of that paragraph. Next one up, next one up. I was wrong. There's 2 paragraphs there. American manufacturers asked Congress for a protective tariff. Even Thomas Jefferson, that's a pretty famous name, who had once urged that our workshops remain in Europe, admitted at the end of the war that manufacturers are now unnecessary to our independence as to our comfort. We must now place the manufacturer by the side of the agriculturalist. In 1816, Congress passed a tariff that was raise the duties on many imported articles. Daniel Webster of Massachusetts spoke against the tariff because New England profited from the brisk trade with England. John C. Calhoun, these are names that are going to be important in the end, we'll come back to them in a little bit, of South Carolina, argued for a tariff in 1816 as a national necessity. Go ahead down a little bit. All right? So we created a tax on English goods to say, listen, we got to stop this. People got to stop buying their stuff. Although the South did not yet have many industries, they had the raw materials, water power, and human power, and Southerners confidently expected that as soon they would have textile factories that would benefit from the tariff. Within a decade, both Webster and Calhoun, those 2 guys we just talked about, one supported, one did not, would change their views. In New England, manufacturing would outweigh commercial interests. In the South, the dreams of industrialization would be abandoned. All right, tally some points up here. I'm going to each give you a chance to earn an additional piece of candy at the end. So I need a B, I need a D, I need a J, and I need an A for now. All right, if you get any of these questions correct, You have an additional piece of candy, or if you don't want the candy, you can have a 5-minute free time. All right, 5 minutes additional free time. So, what I want you to do is put your head down some way that you cannot see what the other people are going to vote for. All right, that's all I care about. Put your head down or turn away so you can't see what the other people are voting for. I want you to be influenced by other people's votes. All right? If you get it right, and multiple people can get it right, then you earn an additional piece of candy. I will mark it up on the board. All right. The first question says, what was the era of good feeling? I will read you all the choices, and then I will read you them a second time, and that second time is when I want you to vote. What was the era of good feeling? Was it A, a time when Americans moved west? Was it B, a time when there was little political strife, meaning there was no conflict, there were no issues, strife? Or was it C, a time when Federalists held political power? Now I'm going to read you the question and the answers one by one. I just want you to vote. All right, I hope to see all 4 hands at some point during the 3 choices. What was the era of good feeling? Raise your hand if you believe it was a time when Americans moved west. Great job, no one voted. That is not the right answer. Raise your hand if you think it was B, a time when there was little political issue, strife, conflict. And raise your hand if you think it was C, a time when Federalists held political power.
Wait, what was B? I didn't hear you.
I'll read them to you one more time. Billy, vote for C?
Yeah.
All right. So I told you A is not the answer. So B, a time when there was little political strife or conflict. Or C, a time when Federalists held political power. Jace, what was your vote? B. I got 3 Bs. Those are the accurate answer. Billy, why do you think it was C? Justify it, and I might give you the incentive anyways. Why do you think it was C? What about any of those words stuck out to you? Federalists, political power, anything?
I thought that this had a better.
Sounded like a better answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it used a term from the reading. It makes sense. All right, you got half. Now, we talked a lot about Federalists. That's why I was willing to kind of give him the thing. We haven't even talked about Americans moving west yet. So if you voted for that, which none of you did, very good, then you were ahead of the game. All right? And the reason I was also willing to kind of bend a little bit for Billy, not only did he hear the word Federalists when we read above, but we never officially said, and that's what you're going to see a lot about these questions, it never explicitly says the answer back in the text. We didn't actually read the words, the era of good feeling was a time when there was little political strife. What we read, that I highlighted for you, was Republicans in Congress passed protective tariffs, established a second national bank, and reached diplomatic understandings with Britain. And we talked about how we were kind of, everything was on the up and up, right? All right, zoom down there, Jace. Here it is, another chance for another answer. Question number 4. I'm going to read you the question aloud, read you all the answers, and then you're going to come back and vote. All right, heads down. How did the British regain their market for manufactured goods in America? How did the British regain their market? Was it A, you're not voting yet, I'm reading you all the choices. A, the British purchased American factories. The British reduced the cost of their goods. Or the British refused to pay import tariffs. All right, how did the British regain their markets for manufactured goods in America? Was it A, raise your hand if you think the British purchased American factories. Raise your hand if you think it was B, the British reduced the costs of their goods. And raise your hand if you think it was C, the British refused to pay import tariffs. All right, heads up. Everyone got that one right. Remember, they reduced the cost so that we, as Americans, would pay for their cheap goods instead of the American-created goods that were a little more expensive. Go ahead, zoom down. How did the British effort to regain their market for manufactured goods affect America's industries? Ready? Heads down. How did the British effort to regain their market for manufactured goods affect American industries? Did they cause many struggling American industries to go bankrupt? Did American textile industries increase their profits? Did they start making more money? Or did they begin to trade with Great Britain? Did trade with Great Britain increase dramatically? So, when the British came in to regain their stronghold on the market, how did it affect the American industries? Those people that had the higher prices, remember that? Raise your hand if you think that many of those industries went bankrupt. Raise your hand if you think that the industries increased their profit. And raise your hand if you think it was C, that they began to trade more dramatically with Great Britain. What do you say? Okay, the answer is A. Many of those industries went bankrupt. Remember, we said 12 of the 150, or less, maybe less than 12, survived. All right? So, 3 to those winners. Billy gets half a candy bar. I'm going to take a bite out of it, and he can have the other half. He likes that. All right, zoom down. We're almost done, guys. Let's see if we can get through a small another section, then we'll be done. All right? Well, I'll try and get you guys at least 10 minutes free time at the end, if you stick with me. The influence of John Marshall, the opinions of Chief Justice John Marshall strengthened national government during this period. I got to catch up on my paper in front of me. There we go. Marshall served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court from 1801 to 1835, and he personally wrote more than 500 decisions. In vigorous prose and with clear logic, he translated his nationalistic views into law. To him, the Supreme Court was more than a court. It was a platform from which he could proclaim to the nation those principles that gave life to the Constitution. In his decisions, Marshall, where is it? In his decisions. Oh, of course I lose it.
Third line.
There it is, yeah, right there. Marshall accomplished 2 important things. These are important. We're going to need these for answers later. Pay attention. First, by a broad interpretation of the Constitution, he strengthened the federal government at the expense of the states. Second, through his energy and vigor, the Supreme Court gained an importance in the federal government that it retains to this day. You've probably seen the idea of that Supreme Court. All right? Supreme Pizza has what on it?
Everything.
Everything, all right? So Supreme Court is in control of everything, all right? They make the big decisions. All right, go ahead down. So he did 2 things. He strengthened the federal government, and he kind of empowered the Supreme Court. Whoa, too far, too far. Look at you, I can tell you want to get done.
Keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going. Right there.
All right, the military victory of Andrew Jackson. Want to read that for me, Billy? Just that paragraph.
After the War of 1812, Spain began to have difficulty controlling the Native American in Florida. When the
Seminoles.
and the Creeks were encouraged by a British colonel to raid American territory, Andrew Jackson was sent to Florida with orders to adopt necessary measures.
Very good. Zoom down for us. We're almost done. A couple paragraphs left. In 1818, Jackson and his men swept into Florida, captured Pensacola from the Spaniards, and claimed the surrounding territory for the United States. Spain could not establish effective control over Florida, and eventually ceded Florida by a treaty to the United States in return for payment of claims that American citizens held against Spain for the amount of $5 million. So basically, we got control of Spain for $5 million, or what it would cost you to buy a ridiculous mansion these days. We got the entire state of Florida. All right, the rights to Florida. So that's a big deal. Spain relinquished Florida to the American government at this time. All right? The Monroe Doctrine. This was a big piece that we talked about at the very beginning. This is our last little section and a few questions and we're done. Seeing the plight of Spain, Britain proposed joint British-American action to stop other European countries from establishing colonies in the Americas. So Britain wasn't the only country that was coming over here and taking over land. Other European nations were now seeing that that was a possibility, and they wanted to avoid that. Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, another important president, all right, opposed this plan because he thought the United States should act independently. All right, he said we should do it on our own. Following Adams' advice, Monroe announced a new policy in his inaugural message to the Congress in December 1823. The statement known as the Monroe Doctrine was a landmark in the United States history. In Monroe's own words, the important points of the Monroe Doctrine were these. Now you can read them on the old script, but if we zoom down, there's a quick video that tells us about it. Okay? Right there. Turn the sound up on there. We'll restart it. Don't worry if you're missing anything. Just read the words in as they appear. Thanks, Jace. Sorry, we should have thought about sound before we got going. If you don't mind, once you get it, Jace, if you could restart it real quick. I think I can maybe even pull it back. I definitely made it big. There we go. Any luck?
Any foreign wars.
There we go. One more time, restart it. My
The
apologies.
United States wouldn't interfere
You don't have to plug in all day.
colonies. 3. The Monroe Doctrine
There we go.
states 4 major ideas. 1. The United States would not take part in any foreign wars.
We're not getting involved in wars.
2. The United States wouldn't interfere with any existing European colonies.
All right, we said we're going to stay out of their business.
The American continents were not subject to further colonization by European powers.
Europe cannot come over and take over any new land.
Any attempt by European powers to further colonize the U.S. would be considered a threat to America's peace and safety.
All right, so we considered anything
The
that
first part
they
of the document
that they were going
pledged
to do in the
that
future as a
America
threat.
would stay out of European affairs that did not concern the United States, and it wouldn't interfere with existing European colonies in the Americas.
Very good. 2 paragraphs, a couple questions, and you're done. A couple more opportunities to win any more candy or free time, should I say. Yeah, just hit it. Top left. I'll continue reading, even though it's not on the board. You'll see in a minute. Following Adams' advice, Monroe announced a new policy in his inaugural address to Congress in December 1823. That's what we just read about. European countries, however, considered the Monroe Doctrine to be unimportant. Very important. Down, down, down. Last paragraph. They considered, the European powers considered that to be unimportant. Right there. The President's desire to guard the Western Hemisphere was somewhat ridiculous in view of America's weak military position. However, knowing that the British Navy would back up the Monroe Doctrine and made no attempt to restore Spain's New World Empire, and Spain finally recognized the independence of her American colonies. In 1824, Russia agreed to establish a southern boundary of Alaska at 54 latitude, 40 longitude. Consequently, the doctrine was never really tested in its early period. Its real importance lay in when it would become a cornerstone of American policy. 3 questions to add your total and we're done. All right? First one. Just close your eyes. You don't have to put your head down this time. Just close your eyes. The policy that, I don't want to lose anybody here at the end. The policy that European nations should not interfere with America was known as, sounds pretty familiar, A, nationalism, B, sectionalism, C, the Monroe Doctrine. Raise your hand when you think you know. The policy that European nations should not interfere with America was known as, raise your hand if you think it's A, nationalism. Raise your hand if you think it is B, sectionalism. Raise your hand if you think it was C, the Monroe Doctrine. Billy got himself back on the board. The Monroe Doctrine, policy that European nations should not interfere. Remember, nationalism is this idea that we all support one another, like we have now. All right? After the bombings in Paris, the sense of nationalism kind of arises. We all, we want to be kind to them, but this sense of urgency, like, we're Americans and we're strong. That's nationalism. Sectionalism would be like, I'm from Delaware. Delaware's the best state. All right? Same idea when the colonies were being founded. The Monroe Doctrine, though, was that European nations would not dive into our business, and we wouldn't dive back into theirs. Next one, there's a couple choices here. All right? Zoom down. As long as you get one, you get... There you go. As long as you get one, you get the incentive. 2 broad goals achieved by the decisions of John Marshall were, close your eyes, declaring the tariff of 1860 unconstitutional. The tariff of 1816 was unconstitutional. Establishing the importance of a Supreme Court. Reducing sectional differences. Strengthening the federal government. And strengthening states' rights. There are multiple choices for this, but you only need to vote for one. All right? You can vote for both answers. There are 2 answers up on the board. I'm going to read it to you one more time. John Marshall's two broad goals were, raise your hand if you think it was declaring the tariff of 1816 unconstitutional. Raise your hand if you think it was establishing the importance of Supreme Court. Raise your hand if you think it was reducing sectional differences. Raise your hand if you think it was strengthening the federal government. And finally, raise your hand if you think it was strengthening states' rights. The two answers that were accurate, everybody got at least one. The only other one that was a choice was strengthening the federal government. Remember, he weakened the states and improved the strength of the federal government so they can have command over everyone. But yes, establishing the importance of the Supreme Court was the correct answer. Last question. See if anybody can get to 5. How did the United States acquire Florida from Spain? Close your eyes. Was it by a separate treaty? Kind of an interesting answer. The Treaty of Paris, or the result of winning the War of 1812? Raise your hand if you think it was the result of winning the war in 1812.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. How did the United States acquire Florida from Spain?
What's a firing?
Mean get. Alright? I just acquired your pencil. I'm not telling you how I acquired it, but I got it, right?
Oh.
That's me acquiring. So how did the United States acquire Florida from Spain? Was it the result of winning the war in 1812? Raise your hand. Was it the Treaty of Paris? Was it? Raise your hand if you think it was a separate treaty. Good job, Billy. Got it. Billy got himself to 4.5. He is our big winner. And we are done for the day. Tomorrow we're going to go into westward expansion. Quick lesson. Now what I want you to do is, do you think you can keep your vocab cards? You can pause for a second. Do you think you can keep your vocab cards? Are they going to be still here tomorrow?